We are so excited to be back today. We have an amazing guest, and she is no joke, the real deal thought leader. You're going to hear from her in just a few moments. But before that, we want to welcome you to our fireside chat on mental health and school social work. We want you to share this message out. So if you are joining us from Facebook Live or LinkedIn Live, go ahead and share this out or comment below so we can get some more views and just get this powerful message out. And if you're joining us from YouTube, you can also participate in the chat. If you are an iRaise person and you're joining us, we want to shout you out too. So go ahead and tell us where you are, where you're from, and be involved in the conversation because your voice is absolutely valuable. So thank you all again. We're going to get started in just a few moments. Thank you for joining us. All right, let's get started. So, again, we are really excited to continue our discussion on mental health, especially social work, which is, a topic that we don't speak about enough. Today, we're hoping to really dig deep in these next few minutes to talk about the importance of school social work and social workers in the context of schools. And we have an expert, Dr. Claire Greenford, I'm going to formally introduce, who is going to talk to us in just a few moments about the work that she's doing within her current position. Well, Dr. Claire Greenford is an inspirational speaker, racial and social justice advocate. She's a business leader, a licensed clinical social worker, and she has an unapologetic foundation of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. This is so true. Her work focuses on mental health, social, and racial justice. She is also the founder and CEO of Dr. Claire Speaks, and you'll get to hear her in just a few moments. And she's a powerful speaker. Dr. Claire Greenford firmly believes in the psychosocial spiritual model of wellness. And she's a strong advocate for holistic and culturally humble practices that considers both a trauma informed and neurobiological lens. That is absolutely amazing. She is passionate about service and is involved in many organizations and professional service organizations. Dr. Claire Greenford also serves as the executive director of the National Association of Social Workers, New York City chapter. Dr. Claire, we are so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being with us today, especially on short notice.
Thank you for inviting, and it's always awesome to share space with you as well, because I am in awe of the amazing work that you do in your servant leadership.
Thank you so much. I'm in awe of you. Everyone knows every time I talk about Dr. Claire, I'm like that Dr. Claire is the one. We're gonna bring her in. She's gonna break it up. So I have authentic conversation with you today. We always we share some of very similar passions and also we just realize beliefs. And I think that really is what connects us. And I love that. So I love sharing space with you. It's always an honor also to just serve under you as a newly elected vice president of NASW board. I love being able to serve you. So I'm just grateful that we get to talk a little outside in our own element. All right. So first, I wanted to give you an opportunity, if I left something out of your bio, to share some of the work that you've been doing or anything else that you like to share before you get started.
I think you captured it. I mean, I did serve as the executive director for NASW NYC, and that work, we have done a lot to make sure that we truly are anti-oppressive, anti-racist, and uplifting those who are marginalized and oppressed. And so I'm excited about this conversation because we're going to be talking about our kids. And that is a marginalized and oppressed group. Often we don't think of the voice of children. And so I'm really excited that you're bringing this center fold, and you have been for a while. So thank you so much for the opportunity and look forward.
Thank you, Dr. Claire. Absolutely. And our kids really are the ones that need to be at the center and the forefront of the conversation when we're talking about mental health. A lot of times we talk about mental health of youth, but they're nowhere to be found. We're like, where are the young people when we're talking about what they need? They're not involved. and they have to be involved as active participants in their treatment and what they need. So, this is a really important topic, but I wanted to first start off with a New York One segment, and just shout out to Dalamu and to Miss P that just put a comment in the chat box. So I wanted to start off with a quick New York One segment. We were able to be featured, I Raise Girls and Boys, and a New York One recently for World Mental Health Day on Monday, this past Monday, which right now the date is not coming to me. I think it was the 10th of October. And we were able to lift up mental health on a larger platform and really talk about the real issues that are going on in public schools. And so I wanted us to be able to watch this segment together, and then we'll talk a little bit about your feedback, Dr. Claire, and then we'll jump into some of the amazing work that you're doing. All right, let's play it.
New York City schools do not have enough mental health professionals to address the needs of all of the students, according to a recent report by the Controller's Office, the State Controller's Office. This is World Mental Health Day, so we are focusing on this issue today. And to do so, I am joined by Shaniqua Moore. She's the founder and CEO of iRaise. It's an organization that focuses on the critical mental health needs of young people, especially young people of color, in this city and in the city's school system. Thank you for coming in to talk about this issue.
Thank you for having me.
These days that are designated for certain issues, it's important to pause and focus on why. And mental health is obviously such a crucial component, especially now, post-pandemic, when we're learning more and more about how people have suffered. So yes. I guess why don't we start with that? You're in the schools, not many of them, but increasingly more and more. Tell us, what is the main issue that New York City school kids are struggling with from your organization's perspective?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I think the first main issue that we're seeing is the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on youth mental health. We're noticing that a lot of kids have had a decline in their mental health and are facing issues like depression and suicidal thoughts and anxiety. Another thing that we're noticing is Black youth in particular are severely impacted, and that's mainly because they grow up in environments that are already stressful, and they're exposed to things like racism and poverty and other factors that really does impact their mental health.
So how are you said that you're in about a dozen schools right now, but you have
Yes.
a big new grant, so that's going to probably almost triple over the next year. In the schools that you're in, how do you help these children that do face those stressors that you're talking about at home, whether it's poverty, racial inequity, or what have you? How are you able to, during the school day, address those issues and help those children through?
Yeah, so we actually have an integrative mental wellness model, and as you just mentioned, we received a generous donation from New York Community Trust to scale our program to all 5 boroughs. Our integrative mental wellness model entails 3 major components. The first is that we believe mental health is everyone's responsibility in a school. So we train educators and professionals in the education school to provide the tools needed to help youth. Secondly, we dispatch social workers and licensed clinicians in the school building, and they work hand in hand with the Department of Education, providing group-based and individual counseling to young people.
And so, is there something that people, that teachers, other care providers should be on the lookout for? Because a lot of times children, it's really hard to know whether they're facing a particular mental health struggle.
Right. And that's a great question. We have been training teachers and educators around New York City on how to identify when a student is in crisis. What we've noticed is that teachers don't necessarily have the language and the tools to identify it. So we've been building up their skills. And through these workshops, we're noticing that teachers are more confident. They're able to now determine when a student is in crisis and refer them to the correct services. I think that teachers should be aware of when a student is acting out in the class. If they're completely withdrawn or if they're acting out, that student may have some issues that are going on that they may not be verbalizing.
And it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach because everybody's got their own issues. Are there any tools that you can give us that reaching out is such a great thing for a teacher to notice that. But what other sort of tools are there that people can employ to try to help a child if they notice something seems wrong?
Yeah. First thing that we need to do is normalize it. I think one of the main issues that is happening is kids are embarrassed and ashamed, and they're afraid to say when something is wrong. When we normalize mental health challenges, we're able to now empower young people to actually say when something is going on. The second thing that we can do is create spaces of wellness, which just means we're creating a space for young people to talk through their emotions. We don't have a lot of these spaces in schools, which is why our work is so critical. We've been working with schools around New York City to create these wellness spaces so that young people can work through their trauma. And I think those are the major things that we can do.
Yeah, those are such good tips, and to learn the language to speak about it and have the space to address it. Shaniqua Moore, thank you for coming in. We really appreciate the work that you're doing, and you're taking the time to come talk with us about it.
Thank you so much.
And just a reminder, iRaise is the organization, and the phone number, you see it there on your screen, 725-8996, and there is the website as well.
All right, thank you so much. So yeah, definitely love to hear feedback and just anything that may have resonated or you wanted to lift up about that specific segment.
I really appreciate starting here, and I think I want to lift up all of it, even though I know we're pressed for time, because you in a short space of time capture some of the overarching challenges. Do we have enough resources? And are we operating from a space that is truly culturally humble? Because you mentioned the experience of Black youth. And one of the things I often caution people is the stereotype that because someone is Black, that they're from the Latin community, that they're Asian American, is that they're struggling and that they're coming from poor areas. This is not true. And so I often say that children and people are not disadvantaged. They are exploited and intentionally marginalized. And so we have to look at that. Who do we value? Do we value the voice of our kids? Do we value the experience? Do we understand how to provide services that are not only sensitive to the individual need, because what was highlighted was the individual response, one size does not fit all, but also responses that honor the vastness of the cultural, religious, social identities and backgrounds that our students and their families carry. New York City is one of the most diverse cities in this country. It has one of the largest school districts in this country.
Yeah,
I know, I wasn't sure because I know we lost some numbers, so we compete with California. But when we're thinking of the largest school district in this country in 5 boroughs, we have to consider, are we providing services to meet the needs of that diversity of those people in such a small space? I often say our leadership, those that are serving students, those that are in our schools, do they represent the students and the families and the communities that are in that school? We know that children will tend to go to their peer groups. Yeah. And we all do, actually. It's not just children. We all tend to go to our peer groups for support. Right. Are we providing adequate supports for children in their peer groups so that they can be ambassadors, if you will, and have those direct connections to adults who know what they're doing, who are able to speak to the needs of those children and respond to their families in a way that they can also receive the support? Because one of the things that we do often is we say, we have all of these services. Well, it's great if you have all the services, but if no one knows about the services, and if those services do not respond to the cultural and social needs of the family, you could have 100 billion gazillion services if you want. It won't matter. It's not about the quantity. It is about the quality and the communication of the message of these services and the responsiveness of these services, which means the individuals behind those services, in order to meet the needs. And I think that is where we are lacking, continue to lack. We keep throwing the same solution at the same problem and expecting a different result.
There's so many great things that you said there. I think what really sticks out to me is not providing a culturally humble approach. And it's, I think there's so many reasons why, but one of the things that was mentioned in a previous meeting we had, I think it was by yourself, was the fact that we have Eurocentric methods of helping people, and that's not helpful. We can't use a Eurocentric approach to all kids, especially kids of color. we can't have talk about mental health and therapy without including cultural identity, or for example, working with Black kids. There's no way to help a Black student or a Black child without talking about racism or intergenerational trauma. There's no way. We're not really doing real work or authentic work if we're leaving out those conversations. And you'd be surprised how many clinicians are very uncomfortable with talking about race with their clients.
I'm not surprised because race is in this country, because of this country's long love affair with racism and oppression that continues.
Yes.
People are uncomfortable confronting things that they themselves may be benefiting from. Let's just be honest. All of our professions, our health professions, are made up of individuals, and individuals that benefit it as themselves, their families, their communities from different systems of oppression. And unless we're able to truly acknowledge those pieces, we will not get anywhere. The American Academy of Pediatrics last year, and also in 2020, indicated that racism was among the leading cause of mental unwellness for Black children. Racism. So if we think about social determinants of health, which we always talk about, we talk about housing, and we talk about physical health and spiritual health and education. What we don't talk about is that the parents of all the social determinants of health is systemic racism and oppression. And unless we address the fact that systemic racism is still influencing the way that we treat our children in New York City schools and around the country, we're not going to be able to have a conversation grounded in truth. And without truth, we can't have reconciliation and healing. And so that is where we need to really focus and start on. Systemic racism continues to plague. Who are our leaders? Who are the heads of most of the social service organizations that are serving our kids? Are they representative of the students and the families that the communities are in? Do we provide services and information in languages that our student body understands? We don't. We're not inclusive. We do not create spaces that allow people to be their whole self. And I don't ever believe in the concept of psychological safety. I'm going to just be very clear about that. It's a myth, because you can't create that, but you can create a system or a process that is culturally humble, culturally curious, and culturally responsive. And that requires sitting in the discomfort and acknowledging that our systems are predicated on Eurocentric, white supremacy framed narratives, our laws, our policies, the way that we treat. So absolutely, systemic racism is the underlying cause. And we need to have systems and people in our schools, social workers, psychologists, teachers, paraprofessionals, parents who represent the students. This is not about the erasure of some group over the other. It's about the true inclusion. Representation does not equal inclusion. And that's where we are falling short. We have representation. Yes, we have school mental health programs, but it doesn't mean that we are actually including that and infusing that in a way that it is integrated, not only in that social emotion learning model, but also in the way that supports the professionals in those spaces to provide the services that they need.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great leadway into the work that the chapter is doing. But just to sort of talk a little more about the school social workers that are employed by DOE and that are tasked with working with students. Just that model in itself, there's so much wrong with it that many people are not aware of, and I think highlighting that is important. Many times when we're in schools, my agency, we're in schools and we're working hand in hand with DOE social workers. There's so much limitations. There's so much that they cannot do. Their reach is not as as far for many reasons. There are mandates placed on them by DOE that dictate who they can and cannot see for how long, what type of interventions can they utilize. Sometimes kids are misdiagnosed. There's so much going on, and when it comes to school social workers, and that the model in itself needs it's very defective. And we think that we've solved the problem because we've hired more social workers, and that's not solving the problem. You've just put a bandage on the problem and you said, go ahead and you're good. No, it requires surgery, requires a deep dive, it requires a systemic change And so, you talked about racism being the underlying cause. Completely agree. Systemic racism, no matter what we do, we cannot get around it. We can dance around it. We could pretend we don't see it. We can ignore it, but it's not going away. And we need to address it. It takes a systemic approach. Looking at policies, looking at our the even disciplinary policies within schools, where Black kids are most likely to be punished severely or harshly or suspended or put into other schools when they do something, when they break rules. Why are you putting kids in another school for 2 weeks and they're missing out on academics and they're isolated from their peers and from their environment? Why is that a solution? It's not a solution. It's really not helping them. It's punitive. And so also looking at ways to look at mental health from a healing stance and not from a stance where we're punishing kids. And that's, typically the approach that DOE has employed. But that was a mouthful, but I wanted you to talk about the great initiative that you mentioned. I think it's public. Is it safe? It's public now. The social wellness initiative through the chapter that is open for proposals. Transcending.
So there's multiple things. So as the executive director of NASW NYC, our role is to not only uplift the social work community and provide opportunities for social workers to be actively engaged and actively participating in their own learning and development, but also helping to educate the community, amplifying the voice of social work, as well as amplifying the communities that social workers serve. We have our annual conference in June of 2023. And one of the things that we are doing right now is a call for proposal. So we're looking for people, social workers, people who are in the field to submit proposals to do workshops for our conference. And we welcome all topics. As long as they center DEI, whether it's mental health, whether it's macro, meso, micro, but we are really hopeful that we will also get a few proposals that would allow us to center school-based social work needs specifically, so that we can create a space for school-based social workers, take the lift off of DOE and other school-based programs, so that we can actually have a track within our general conference that centers and talks specifically about some areas and needs that school-based social workers have. So we invite people to go on NASW NYC's website. Our handle at all the things is at NASW NYC. And you will see the call for proposals. It's out for the next 2 months. So please get your proposals in. And again, we are seeking general presentations. The theme is transcending above chaos and making those, really certain to those opportunities that we can have in chaos. But we want to also center wellness. We are intentionally also grounding this in wellness, because as much as we talk about our students, we have to speak about the wellness of the providers in our school systems. You mentioned about working with school social workers. We get outreach by school social workers, and both personally and professionally, people that I work with, people that I am friends with, people that I mentor are school-based social workers. And the stresses and struggles that they're going through, while not unlike other social workers, is unique in a way because the system that they're interacting with is so multi-layered and bureaucratic, and it really restricts their ability to social work in those settings. One of the things is we call, let's get more social workers. It doesn't matter how many social workers you have if those social workers are not supported and are not able to adequately provide the services they are uniquely trained and qualified for. The thing I will say I love about social work is the person and environment lens. We're not only concerned with what is happening with you as an individual, we look at what are the factors in your environment that shape you as an individual and shape your response, either your healing response or your trauma response to that environment. And almost year to date, from when we're doing this talk right now, I actually presented testimony to the New York City Education Budget and Revenue Committee at their public hearing October 5th last year. And we spoke about the school-based social work needs. NASW NYC supported the expansion of school-based social workers in New York City schools. In April of 2021, the mayor's office announced the unprecedented expansion of school-based social workers, and that was the announcement of hiring over 500 social workers. NASW NYC had been working behind the scenes, with DOE partners for months just to lend our area of expertise, lend our voice, lend our thoughts about how that would look.
Right.
Or what it should look like, or what are some considerations. And, one of the things that I was very clear on about the most repeated concerns among New York City school social workers was, one, the extremely low pay and compensation for their education, skills, and training, and the licensure. By the time a social worker is even a licensed master social worker, we're talking about years of training. We're talking about your 12 years, in K through 12. We're talking about college. We're talking about graduate school. And we're talking about passing of a national licensure exam. By the time someone's a clinical social worker, now we're talking about the passing 2 national licensing exams. And yet we see a lot in our social service sectors, I see positions for social workers, $45,000, $50,000 to be in schools. That is insulting. The other piece is the high caseloads and the inadequate staffing. I currently have mentees right now in one of a large, school district in New York City, and it's frustrating because it's in that school there are 4 social workers, and that's huge. But there are 12 schools connected to that school.
Oh my goodness.
So when you think about and they go from different schools, the social work team is maybe 20 something people for 12 schools. And we're not talking about schools that only have 100 kids. And the last piece that social workers talk about, in addition to the low compensation, the high caseloads, is the inadequate or no supervision. In our schools, most social workers are not supervised by social workers.
That's right.
How do we don't allow, for example, someone who's not trained as an architect to submit building plans to build a building. We don't allow someone who is not trained as a firefighter or a volunteer firefighter to go and respond to fires. Shout out to my boo, my husband's a NYC firefighter. He's my favorite one. Think he's the cutest one. He's gonna so kill me for saying that. But the reality is that we don't allow people who are not medically trained to do cardiac surgery, and we don't allow them to be supervised by people who are not medically trained. We don't allow NYPD officers to be supervised in terms of how to do policing and the policing procedures without being supervised by someone. But yet we say social workers who are responsible for helping to support the social needs of children, the biopsychosocial responses to children in a culturally humble way, can be supervised by people who are not social workers. There's something wrong in that model. And we continue to wonder why there's gaps and breaks in the system. Yet, should something go awry, the first people that we blame are social
workers. Blame us. They will blame
the social workers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's interesting because one of the things I've noticed, we talked about this too, Dr. Claire, is the lack of social workers' voice being at the table in his current administration in New York City. I don't remember at least one time since Mayor Eric Adams' administration that social workers were called to the table. Please correct me if I'm wrong. If it's happened, I apologize.
It's not happening in New York City, National Association of Social Workers in New York City chapter. I can tell you that. And it is not. And it's disheartening to me because all of the issues that I've seen come out, even before this administration, are all connected to social work-based stuff, whether it's the housing crisis in terms of people who are unhoused, whether it's our mental health crisis and our response, that's the social work, whether it's the school crisis that we haven't, when's the current immigration crisis we have in New York City right now, and the human rights crisis we have right now. We are not invited to the table. We're often invited for the press op, for the picture, to give a line. We work behind the scenes and provide the insight, the strategy, and the resource. And when it's time for the press conference, we're not invited. When it's time to actually make decisions at the table and not have just representation, but have a voice that matters and has weight, we are not represented and we're not invited. And that is the problem. We continue to have systems which would rather check boxes than check hearts and would rather have a photo than be able to change the trajectory of someone's life and to have people at the table. We talk about DEI all the time in our services, but I cannot think of any of the major issues right now that has come out. And I think part of it is we don't have enough social workers, not only in our policy and in all of these different spaces in government, but even when they are there, they are not supported. They are not valued, and people don't understand that they are social workers. One of my favorite council members, Councilmember Linda Lee, she's a social worker, and she is an advocate, and I adore her because her and passion is grounded in anti-oppression and in mental health and in lifting people up. We have amazing people.
Yes.
But do they have the support? How can we treat and address social, emotional, mental health needs? And we refuse to invite the social workers, who are the largest providers of mental health services in this country, at the table.
In this entire country.
The whole country. Largest providers of mental health and behavioral health services are social workers in all spaces, whether it's hospital, substance misuse, whatever it is. We are among the largest providers of behavioral health and mental health services in the country. And yet we are the most underpaid and the least respected.
That's right. And I think just, oh my goodness, you said something that just really stuck with me. And that's, we have a bureaucratic government that's more invested in checking boxes than checking hearts. And I think that really is it, because we know as social workers, we are the heart checkers. We're the ones that are consistently scanning and wanting to care for what matters most to people and really what matters to their heart. And heart matters. And so we have a government that's not, and that doesn't necessarily want that. That's not their agenda. And so I think including or putting us at the table will be competing with their priorities. But if we really want to solve this problem, especially with school social work, there's no other way to solve it without bringing social workers to the table to be the decision makers, not for photo ops, but to really be at the table on these task forces. There are so many task forces that are happening. Where are the social workers that are represented on those task forces? Why is NASW New York City not included when there are all these rollouts, plans to address kids' mental health? It's not solving the issue. So the real issue is, as mentioned by you, Dr. Claire, is it requires a systemic. We already know systemically it's a defect. The system is defective. Now that we know that, we need to dismantle it. We need to build a new one that's going to actually help our kids. And one that's going to include social workers at the center of the decision-making process.
Absolutely. And look, I don't know whether this mayoral administration or others are truly invested in the holistic response. I understand that, like many people, NASW included, the current mayor and the administration have many competing interests. I think for me, though, however, one of the things that has baffled me is that a lot of what we're talking about, what this administration is talking about, is directly connected to work that social workers do, eat, breathe, sleep, and live. Like the challenges that we are facing before this administration and years back and currently are not challenges that are unfamiliar to social work. And I will give a quick story, if I may. Sure. I remember working in a system, and there was a student who had homicidal ideations. And, when I was told about the student, I reported it to the leadership in that setting, in an academic setting, and they were very panicked. And they didn't understand why I was calm. This is really serious. How could you not think this is a big deal? It is not that I don't think that homicidal ideations are a big deal. It is that I am trained and I have dealt with this so many times that this to me is, I'm assessing. For me, this person is acting their thoughts out through drawing, through visual arts. They have no intention of doing it. They are expressing their feelings. That to me is a safe way for them to express their feelings and the experiences they're having and the thoughts they're struggling with. I am grateful that this person let me know. So we are saying, oh my gosh, everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. There's a school mental health crisis. Our kids need this. Our kids need this. And the social workers is sitting there like, yeah, this is what we trained for. Tag us. This is not unfamiliar to us. And it's not because we are some superhumans. It's because we are trained for this. It's because our systems approach allows us to not only look at this problem, but also looks at where there are solutions and strengths. It means that we are trained to look into your spiritual network and see if you have supports there. It means that we know that there is an importance of the human-animal bond. And if having an animal or supportive friend will be able to help you, then we know that that will work. Just as much as we know that therapy is not for everyone. We know that perhaps you need an after-school program where you're going to get to be physically active and mentored because it's a lack of mentorship in your life. And it's because we know that we need to provide services that are responsive and in your language. It means that when I've had a child that is of a certain ethnicity or a client that is of a certain ethnicity or religious group, that I am not going from a lens that says, well, what do you think? If I know that I have someone who's from a culture, a religious identity, a group that says the male identified individuals in this family need to be in the decision-making room, that with their permission, and in honoring that, I am humble enough to say what will work for you. It means that I know that when we talk about complementary and alternative medicine, that I actually believe that modern medicine is complementary and alternative to the practices we've had for thousands of years. It means that I know that networks and kinship groups, indigenous groups, whether the indigenous groups of this country, the indigenous groups of New Zealand, the indigenous group of Nigeria, that there's a kinship approach to addressing needs. And so it's not a one-on-one. I know that we need to involve the community. And that is what's missing from a Eurocentric, white dominant frame. And have to work to unlearn, because all of us have been trained in this model. We have to decolonize our training, and we have to submit to the needs of our clients to truly work from a space that honors the dignity and worth of each individual, and operates from a space that honors client self-determination. And that is social work. So I invite this mayoral administration, I invite the leaders to say, if we mistook the importance of social work, if we overlooked it, then we should be at the table, and we should invite them to the table, and not for the photo op. We want to hear their voice, and we want to see their strategies and their thoughts in addressing the school-based mental health needs of our students. We don't have a crisis. A crisis suggests we can't do anything about it and we're panicked. We have solutions, and that means bringing the kids to the table, bringing their families to the table, bringing organizations like yours to the table, bringing organizations like NASW to the table, and bringing the parents to the table.
That's right. Absolutely. And everything that you said is just so spot on. More specifically, when you address the decolonizing of our approaches, that's so real. We've been so trained, our conscience is like so smeared in this. We've been trained in this, from whether in undergraduate, grad school, just in general in society. This is what we've been told. This is the right approach. This is the way to do it. And so we have been, culturally, blatantly disrespectful, because we have not allowed other cultures to have a place in their own healing process. We've blatantly shut them out, their practices, their beliefs out of the healing. And there's no way to do that. You cannot try to heal a child your way, or heal a person your way, and try to extract a part of them and call it healing. It's not.
It's not, because it's healing if I identify it as healing, not if you determine that it is healing. It is healing if I can actually do what you're suggesting, and if you meet me where I am. My entire medical team are Black and Indigenous and women of color. And it has made such a difference in the way that I am treated and my health. But it took me years. All 12 of my providers, because of all of them, are women of color, or Indigenous Black women of color. It has made a difference, because when I said in my culture, I'm from the West Indies, I'm from Barbados, This is how we approach. We use also in the infusion of holistic practices. Until I had that team, whether it was my doctor from Korea, my doctor from Haiti, my doctor from here, my doctor from China, they understood and valued that and said, here's how we can make this work with you.
That's right.
And what we're not recognizing is it is not only impacting our school-based providers. School social workers need to be supported.
That's right.
They need to be supported because you cannot help those who are responsible to heal if they are continuously being harmed. That math ain't mathin'. It's not.
It ain't mathing.
We also have to recognize that our refusal to invest properly and truly and holistically into our school system is killing children. We are missing children and people are falling behind the cracks. Last year, when I gave the testimony, I gave the story of presenting at a school earlier in 2021 because one of my mentees asked me to present for a career day. And as I was presenting, despite the fact that those children were off screen and it was Zoom, something in my gut, because of my years of training, said to me in both sessions I did, something is going on with one of these children. In both sessions. And I asked the teacher who was, leading the conversation after if we could speak. And I said, I'm struggling because I am here to talk about careers, but my career and my heart is telling me something's going on with these kids. I don't need to know because of privacy rules, but something is going on. I'm picking up that based on the way this child is speaking, what they're saying, what they're not saying, that they may be dealing with some clinical depression. And I think it's so important. And I ended up speaking to my mentee about it. And I said, I don't want to know names. I don't want to know details, but this is what I'm feeling. And later, she said, I don't know how you knew, but without going into details, the child in the first group that you picked up actually fell off of our radar and has struggled with suicidality for a long time. The other child, we knew, but we didn't have the support. I have gone to my principal, who I really like, and talked about these kids and other kids, but my principal is not trained mental health wise, and she doesn't know how to support me. She doesn't know how to respond. And it stayed with me because she said, these kids had fallen through the cracks and off of our radars because we don't have enough social workers to help the students. And we don't have supervisors who are clinically trained and understand mental health that can help us navigate and identify clinical needs before they become catastrophic. We are all just trying to survive in the burden of this pandemic. We are exhausted, but we're also dealing with teachers who are walking out of school in the middle of the day and social workers being asked to cover classes. This was last year.
Yeah.
By the grace of God, I was there, and it has haunted me and yet given me relief that if I help to be the intervention for two children who I never saw their faces, but I heard their voice and saw their responses in a chat. And because of my clinical training, I may have been able to save their lives. I thank God that I did that career day that day. But I also break knowing that the principals who care so much, who are all themselves stressed, do not have the supports. And to know that my mentee is saying, we don't have social workers to go to. We're processing cases with people who are trained in education. How do we process suicidality and mental dis-ease and support wellness when the people supervising are not clinically trained? And I don't blame those principals at all. I want to be very clear. It is not their fault. They're doing one heck of a job with very limited resources as well.
Absolutely.
But that model does not make sense. So when we talk about we care about our children, how when we are allowing this in New York City schools today?
That's so major. It's so major. We have had DOE social workers reach out to us on countless occasions asking us for help, whether they should make a call to take a child to the hospital or make a CPS call, or is this child going to commit suicide? Do we let them go? And these are DOE social workers, untrained, can't, in that respect, can't speak to their supervisors who are principals about it because they don't have the expertise. And it's such a disservice to social workers that work for the DOE as well as for our kids and for their parents. And so we know that this model is not working. We have to, we must. It is not negotiable. We need to include social workers at the forefront of this, and especially at the decision-making table. When it comes down, before plans are rolled out, we need to be a part of the pre-planning process, and we need to, as mentioned by you, have our strategies ready, conversing with the appropriate stakeholders, and being a part of that, because there is no way for someone that's not trained and that's not a social worker to really strategize a systemic approach. And so, we just have to be at the table. But I'm sorry, Dr. Claire, did you want to mention?
No, I know I'm like, I'll talk to you forever, but I would say, and all of this and what we're talking about is exactly why the National Association of Social Workers New York City chapter for years has been advocating for the expansion of school-based social workers and services to meet those needs in our schools. We have continued to push because of the disparities. Not only did the comptroller say recently there's not enough school-based mental health services, but we are also saying it's not only the services, it's the adequate pay, the supervision, but also the progression and growth that needs to be there. But we have for years advocated and will continue to advocate until every single school has a team, not one, team of social workers and behavioral health providers that have a true integrated health model to address the biopsychosocial spiritual needs of our children and our families. Because many of our school districts and many of our schools don't even have one social worker. They're sharing social workers. How are you sharing social workers? So NASW will continue that fight, but NASW also needs partnership and support from our social work community. I say it all the time. And so before we go, social workers, stop demanding of NASW NYC what you're not willing to support. We are your professional representation body, but there are 4 staff members, including myself, and over 25,000 licensed social workers in New York City alone. That math ain't math. And if you're asking 4 people to fight for 25,000 people, NASW NYC is the members. And I also say that with organizations like yours and the mayor's office and council members and leaders and families, we are ready and happy to be part of the solution. And we are also ready and happy to create space for those who are left out, because it's not about us getting a seat at the table. It's about us leaving the door wide open for everybody else to get into that room. And that is the approach that social work has. It is certainly the approach that under my leadership, NASW NYC has taken and continues to take. And it is certainly the approach that we want to embrace. This is a holistic model. Social workers believe in systems.
That's right.
So we want to partner with you. We want to partner with everyone. And we're saying we want a seat at the table because we know that if we change an individual, we can change their family. And if we change their family, we can change the community. And if we change that community, we can change the world. Social workers are world changers.
That's right.
Thank you.
I love that. That is such a beautiful note to end on. We are world changers. So you social workers out there that are watching us right now, watching us later on, you're a world changer. You hear that? So no excuses. Join your local chapter, especially if you are in New York City and you're watching this. Why are you not connected to your chapter? Reach out to us. Put the website up there, please, Kristen. Reach out to us. There's so much great work, advocacy and policy work that's going on. Dr. Claire and her team works around the clock to make sure that our priorities are lifted up in New York City legislative wise. And so if you are interested in joining the chapter, please look into memberships, becoming a member. There's so many benefits in membership. We are a great chapter. There are a lot of networking, professional development opportunities, leadership opportunities, and opportunity to represent your profession. And so you're a world changer. You are needed. We need you. Your voice is valuable. You are valuable to the work. So we thank you so much, Dr. Claire, for being with us. We appreciate you so much. You are family to us, whether you like it or not.
I love it. I love it.
Sarah family, you've been grafted in. We appreciate your work and your leadership, your authentic, transparent, passionate leadership. We love you. We appreciate you. And yes, social workers matter. Thank you for that. And thank you all for those that have been watching and supporting these fireside chats. We want to continue lifting up mental health and the heart matters of our society and our community. So please share this message. Continue joining us, continue supporting. There's so many ways to support and get involved. Again, encourage you to get connected to your local NASW chapter. If you're in New York City, your local chapter is going to be what's listed, what's shown on the screen right there. And Dr. Claire Greenford, again, is the executive director. So thank you all. Thank you so much. Everyone have a very safe afternoon, a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next week, Tuesday, for our next segment. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Claire. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.